Jai Guru, everyone.
Jai Guru. Welcome to the next episode of Yogananda podcast. We're going through the excellent book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, going through it kind of line by line. We are in chapter 12, part 13. It's a long chapter, chapter 12. It is my years at my master's hermitage. And we are almost the usual group. We have Chris is not here today, but we have Kian joining us. Hey, Kian, how's it going? How are you today?
Very good, thank you. Good, glad to be here. How are you?
Yeah, excellent. Yes, and Lauren and Priyanka are also here. I hope you guys are all well. And we are going to start off. We have changed our format a little bit recently. So the thing we start off with now is we want to have a brief summary of the previous episode. Are you going to kick us off, Priyanka, on that?
Yes, it was a brief summary of a 2-hour episode. I don't know how brief we can make it. So we last time we obviously introduced Kian into our podcast. Welcome back, Kian. You met the minimum grade requirements to come back, so congratulations. No, you're fantastic. So yeah, we also talked about his love for the AOI, which is fantastic. To have some new insight on that compared to us. We talked about the section of the chapter talked about parents who, Mukunda's father was visiting Sri Yukteswar, and we talked generally about parents and their influence over us, and Mukunda's father's influence on Mukunda. And then we talked about criticism. That theme has been a theme for the last couple of episodes and this one as well, and offering constructive feedback in our own lives, how we go about it in comparison to Sri Yukteswar's ways. And there was also the interesting element of Sri Yukteswar backtracking, which is a rare thing, which is quite interesting to talk about. But generally, yeah, we're talking about the challenges of influencing people to become more spiritual in our lives, just as Sri Yukteswar was doing for his chelas.
Yeah, and it's not a trivial concept. You can easily talk 2 hours over that. Isn't that right?
I think they often went all night, Sri Yukteswar and Guruji.
Yeah. And so in this episode today, we're going to continue with that. Mukunda mentions here in the beginning that he was a little bit in fear of Sri Yukteswar's rebuke, but then he also saw that they were only aimed at his close disciples, and so he felt that they were given out of care from the guru for his disciples. So he talked about him being able to accept them better and create an effortless harmony with his guru. Then he talked about the spiritual temperament of Sri Yukteswar, that he felt his own temperament was very devotion based, but Sri Yukteswar's was more about wisdom, and he felt that even though his guru was more talking about wisdom and he felt it was a bit dry, it did not diminish his own devotion, but rather enlarged it. And it ends with this wonderful description of their relationship. He said it's a lot of it is inarticulate, yet possesses a certain eloquence. So we're gonna go start at the beginning. The first sentence is, during my early month with Master, I experienced a sensitive fear of his reprimands. And that is an interesting thing, because we would have, or I would have thought by now that he describes Sri Yukteswar as this guru that he adores and loves so much. And I was a bit surprised, but then oftentimes in this book you see Mukunda has very natural, very relatable human reactions to things that happen to him, and it's also in this case, and it's also, you have to see that he has those experiences, so we can I think I would have reacted like this if I would have gone to an ashram and there was a guru and he would have constantly commented on my behavior, constantly find a fault with me. I think the thing that inside of me that would have acted up would have been my ego, because that is a torture treatment for the ego. But that's kind of the purpose of the whole thing, right? It is the reason why we're going through it. Yes, Kian?
Yeah, and for me, the relatability that is the whole of Yogananda's life was to, as a divine example. And so it helps it make it more relatable. And, for us, those entering discipleship or who've taken discipleship, or even just in the world learning from mentors or friends. And oftentimes that can be superficial fear of, being critiqued. And then that's the role of the guru, and that's what the disciple signs up for, is to have those walls broken down. So it's a natural process. It's not denial. It's a natural process, and then transcending that.
This line of that he's experienced a sensitive fear of Sri Yukteswar's reprimands. Does it? Is there a slight backtracking of Guruji's kind of manner with his guru, perhaps? Because when in the first part of this chapter, when Sri Yukteswar and Mukunda, when he comes back to the ashram, Mukunda says, Sri Yukteswar says essentially, you don't follow my wishes, you ignore my wishes. And then Mukunda says, no longer, Guruji, your wish shall be my law. Then Sri Yukteswar says, that's better. Now I can assume responsibility for your life. And then Mukunda says, I willingly transfer the burden, Master. But now, having transferred the burden, he's seeing how heavy the burden is on himself. So he's become very sensitive, perhaps more than he has been in his 18 years.
Yeah, exactly. I feel like it's also a bit of a lesson and a nod to us devotees, because, particularly in the beginning, you can be very fervent and, you very willing, right? But then the reality is that it's not necessarily easy. And, with Guruji fearing his guru, it feels like it mirrors potentially like mostly our relationship. We go in and we say, yeah, discipline me, but that discipline is difficult to take, right? And it can be quite sensitive to go through. So, but it's really also comforting to know how it ends, right?
Yeah. And I think Lauren, what was that point that you just made about the fear of the disciple? Not fear of the disciple, about that certain sensitivity to the ego, of the ego to the discipline of the guru.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. We come in with our full fervency, and then the reality is that our ego gets a bit sore, and actually right. It is a bit tricky sometimes to face.
Yeah, and I think that ultimately it's because guru, translating from the Sanskrit, is dispeller of darkness, and I think that's the it's not, maybe it's the attachment of the ego to, or the delusion of the soul thinking that we're the ego and that's reality, and that we might lose that if we're tuning into this wisdom, or if we're tuning ourselves to the insight and discipline of the guru. And so it being a natural process, and that as Brink was saying, once we actually take that step into discipleship, that we become more sensitive maybe to our own states, and have inner impulses to try and refine that we might not have had before. So I think it takes on a different tone as well, because oftentimes if someone critiques us and we take it egotistically, we might not look to try and change ourselves, but that's part of it. And so we look for that insight into how we can reform ourselves as much as possible. So for me, this is a very practical step of Guruji laying out how to be a true disciple.
I remember a talk by Brother Anandamoy on this topic, and he said, we say this prayer, chisel thou my life to thy design, and then Guruji takes that responsibility and he starts chiseling your life. And Brother Anandamoy was like, then you say, "Ow, Guruji, that hurts," because he's chiseling. Right?
Which talk is that?
I can't remember. Probably loyalty. I keep referring that, but
Okay.
Loyalty, the highest spiritual law.
Right.
But it's true, though, isn't it? Everything you've said. It's very difficult because pretty much everything about you has to change.
What we think is us.
It sounds like a visit at the dentist a little bit when you describe it like that. I like that description that Guruji made a few parts earlier, where he says like he's used to discipline because his dad was strict and his older brother Ananta, he was severe, but Sri Yukteswar is drastic.
Yeah.
And Sri Yukteswar holds his students to a really high standard and is, I think maybe what Guruji is also describing here is that it's a lot, and he did not know 100% what he signed up for, that it would would be training at this intense level maybe. But he also says that Sri Yukteswar really does it from a point of care for his chelas, and if somebody talks back to him instead of taking the critique to heart, he then falls into silence. So it's not really about being right. It's not about winning an argument with your students. It's really about giving that feedback to your students.
Did your parents ever do this? Like when when you've disappointed them, the worst thing they could do is just like not tell you off and not shout at you, just silence, silent treatment, and it makes you feel so guilty and like, regretful.
No comment.
Actually reflect. Yeah, that's a good point, because sometimes if there's immediate, like harsh, criticism or telling off if we do something, then that can elicit automatically the opposite reaction in us of trying to resist that. But if it's quiet, then there's more time for us to reflect, and we don't have that same impulse, egotistical impulse.
Yeah, I think you're right, Priyank. Especially the relationship with my father was a little bit like that. So,
Nice.
Yeah. And to be fair, that is a good analogy, I would think. If you are a student in an ashram, I mean, it's not like they're all adults. So, but it is, I think the relationship you have with your guru is you want to make your guru proud. You want to impress your guru. And if you feel like your guru is disappointed in you, that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, and for me, the autobiography is such a practical book, and Guruji says about his Gita commentary, the Gita is a textbook for life, as well as spiritual, the inner life, and that there's the outer show or the story that's being played out here, but also it's kind of a solution manual as well. If in this situation, if we feel this, do this. And for me, I feel if there might be a situation I encounter that in my life that I view an autobiography of Yogi or an analogous one, if I it's like a test, can experiment. If I do what Guruji does, or he's set out by example, then it becomes a whole lot easier, and then even very beneficial. And then it feels like the real meaning behind whatever test we're going through, outer or inner, is is understood, and then we move past that lesson.
Yogananda goes on. He talks about that Sri Yukteswar is not aiming those rebukes towards visitors or people who just are occasionally at the ashram, but really just toward people who ask for his training. So he feels a special responsibility for them. And then there's a sentence there that is very telling. It says, "Brave indeed is the guru who undertakes to transform the crude ore of ego-permeated humanity." So that means, the way I understand this is that if you actually train your disciples like that, you are asking for that reaction of the ego, right? And you really have to have sincere disciples who keep their ego under control, because otherwise the ego will act up and it might create a counter reaction.
Yeah.
You muted, Priyank.
Oh.
Sorry, no, Kian, you go.
Oh, yeah, with Sri Yukteswar about the guru being brave, and we can be trying to do the right thing, we can be guided intuitively, but until there's our final yoga, then we make mistakes. And so the guru is really in the position to give completely insightful instruction, and there aren't many of them. So I think it's also an honoring to those who have made the effort to purify and know themselves as spirit, so that they can really help others.
That once you become self-realized, or you've transcended the three worlds, you have, the Gita describes, you have the option to stay in that eternal bliss, or retain your personal, or you can choose to come back and come back as a savior for humanity, i.e. as an avatar and as a guru to help God in bringing other souls back. And so this is what I think this line refers to in myself. Brave is indeed the guru who undertakes to transform the crude ore of ego permeated humanity, because it's quite a sacrifice, isn't it? Because as soon as you're reborn here, the debt starts building up. Even if you're an avatar, you still have to play that, you still have to go through pains and trials and tribulations, just as all of our gurus did, right? You did, that was optional for them.
Yes, it is a sacrifice on both ends. Of course, it's a much higher sacrifice on the guru's side, but it's also the chela. If imagine you have the same behavior towards someone who is not a self-realized master, you would be going in a really precarious situation. So
blind leading the blind.
Yes. And Guruji, he summarizes this compassion of the guru in this last sentence. He said, "The saint's courage is rooted in his compassion for Maya bewildered man, the stumbling eyeless of the world." So it's really that picture of the guru that we see so often, right? The God's boatman, right? Who is like coming with bleeding feet until the last of us have made it.
Really nice. This reference to the impact of Maya here is the stumbling eyeless of the world. So even though we can see, we can't really see. Our vision is clouded, and until those clouds disappear, we may as well be blind, eyeless. That's what that line is saying.
Right. Yeah, and the sentence where it says that only Sri Yukteswar would only give his verbal vivisections to those who would ask him to discipline them. And sometimes I think there's the view whenever someone says guru, and then someone says, "Oh, that's this person who's trying to, it can also be almost be cultish as a person who's trying to claim authority over people and tell them what to do. But of course, that's not the meaning of guru. That's just, you know, someone's deluded who thinks that they're a leader, and that's not unique to, you know, spiritual endeavors. But that as, you know, guru disciple relationship, it's a two-way thing. So only the disciple has to enter into it as well. And the guru's, you know, full attunement with God and is working to bring souls back, and the disciples' efforts unlock that ability to receive the discipline from the guru as well.
Yogananda then goes on, and he says that he had this underlying resentment towards his master's instructions, rebukes, and he said as he abandoned those, he found that also the treatment from Sri Yukteswar became a bit softer, and that was maybe one of the maybe a sign that this was one of the big steps he had to overcome living in the ashram. It basically decreased the friction between him and his guru, and he says master melted into comparative clemency. And so I'm guessing he overcame this, and this was maybe like the first test of how to live in the ashram. You have to tear down those kind of ego walls that you build up. And he says that he demolished every wall of rationalization of the subconscious. So he really had to let Sri Yukteswar come in, and because usually it's yourself who finds faults with yourself and changes them. But here you really had then a guru who really gave you feedback that you then have to take to heart and not let the ego say, oh, because the ego loves to rationalize critiques, right? It takes them and then says, he just said that because he was in a bad mood, or he saw me in the wrong light, or I don't know. There's always a million explanations that we can find for somebody critiquing us. And he was trying to do away with all of this and just take in the message.
Right. Yeah, it's that aspect of surrender, but also the using the will to consciously attune. And there's a quote from Guruji that if you're in tune with me, I can take your karma, and if you're not in tune, I cannot take it because you shut me out. So here I think is a practical example of if we don't want to, if we're inwardly resisting that discipline that we can test in our lives, it makes us happier, or we learn the lessons that we're wanting to. If we resist that, then we have problems and continue to be miserable in the world or have a negative attitude. But if we're positive and we're accepting of that and trying to continuously put into practice, maybe we don't always understand completely because that only comes in final yoga, but Guruji demonstrating here that through that change in attitude, that positive thinking or willpower, then that produces a tangible change in his relationship with Sri Yukteswar.
The other element that I saw in this line, where he says, in time I demolished every wall of rationalization and subconscious reservation behind which the human personality generally shields itself. I thought there was so much in that. And in terms of me shielding myself, I just always, in hindsight, on reflection, look at kind of the lies we tell ourselves and like justify what we're doing that may not be the way Guruji wants us to do things, whether that's in, you know, pleasing the senses or catering to the senses, whether that's like habits to do with meditation or like giving yourself excuses for not meditating or not doing some part of Guruji's techniques that, or teachings that may be quite hard to do, because the easy path is the one of least resistance. And this is essentially what this line is saying, that he kind of, through Sri Yukteswar's grace, he kind of went past that, that silly rationalization that the human personality uses to generally shield itself. So there's so much in that, isn't there? And that's how we have to rein in the ego and let King Soul reign supreme in our existence.
Yeah, there's with the ego, what was it? When we're trying to shield ourselves, and it's I think Guruji talks about unselfishness as constant mental effort and preparedness, and so that whether we're a disciple of a path or not, it's a constant effort of introspection and trying to attune, and which only ends in final yoga. So it's not like this thing where we just, oh, maybe this habit's out the way or that habit, but we'll know because there'll be no barriers, and we'll have complete happiness. So yeah, that's part of the positive expansion, I think, is continuously making that effort to break down and Guruji's quote about Sri Yukteswar storming the inner citadels, whose fall is the height of a man.
Yeah, there's one word that was needed more explanation here. It's the word subconscious. They added a whole section at the bottom about it. I'm just going to read it out. It's our conscious and subconscious being is crowned by our superconsciousness. Rabbi Israel H. Leventhal pointed out in a lecture in New York many years ago, the English psychologist F.W.H. Myers suggested that hidden in the deep of our being is a rubbish heap as well as a treasure house. In contrast to the psychology that centers all its researches on the subconscious in man's nature, the new psychology of the superconscious focuses its attention upon the treasure house, the region that alone can explain the great, unselfish, heroic deeds of man. And as Austrian, I always have to point out my man Sigmund Freud from Vienna, who my boy, he wrote a lot about subconscious and popularized the term. And I think that's what this remark here is also pointing towards. But there's also the superconscious, which F.W.H. Myers and others are talking about, which, if we say, I think in this description here, if you would say the subconscious is the rubbish heap, then the superconscious would be the treasure house where the good things come from. Kian?
Yeah, that's a great analogy. For me, that was the first time really hearing about the superconscious in this book. There's a subconscious, and there's all those wonderful psychological experiments you can find about hypnosis, people lying across a chair and someone standing on them and they don't move, and all this different cool things, but it's still unknown. And then I experiment a lot with subconscious techniques to try and follow that as much as I could. But then to find out about the superconscious, it's so positive. It's associated with all the hopeful and good things, and it's actually, we can consciously access it. So that's one of my great appreciations, is learning about the superconsciousness and the actual definition, because often, generally, I think it's left out of psychology.
this implies, this footnote implies that psychology and psychiatry principally deals with the scrap heap. So what was the word he called it? Scrap heap. The garbage.
The rubbish heap.
The garbage.
Yeah, the garbage pile. Yeah,
exactly. Which is a really poor way, poor practice, isn't it? Because obviously they're probably trying to, solve that to get to the good stuff. But that means that virtually no analysis or psychiatry is dedicated to just purely the good stuff, the super conscious stuff, right? Because that just, if they did do that, then they would have a much clearer line to get from the garbage heap to the good stuff in the super consciousness. But you sense that is not where the money is. That's not where that's not where people don't necessarily go to psychiatrists to focus or to get, develop. Like someone that's mentally very healthy doesn't go to a psychiatrist to make themselves healthier or super healthy or go connect to their super conscious. That would be one good fine day if that was the case, and psychiatrists could actually specialize in that. A guru psychiatry, perhaps.
Yeah, I think there's some good quotes in the Gita about in Guruji's Gita commentary about from one of the professor, I think it was psychologist, maybe at Harvard or somewhere else, about the meditation erasing the habit grooves in the brain. And so, it seems there's one psychologist I was looking at. He's very prominent, and he's so maybe furiously intelligent. Also, he's so determined to get to the truth. It's interesting. He's winding up with kind of like super consciousness focus, even that he might not be saying it specifically, but it always comes to faith, but into like a practical definition of it. So it's interesting to see how deep study of the subconscious and deep study of psychology and human behavior and his path leads him to articulating very in line with the yogic texts, but I don't think without knowing it. He talks about God a lot as well, but I think we're getting to that point where the answer is really being found there, and the more we ask questions, the subconscious can't heal it, and we can't. Atheism as well doesn't make sense, because then it means to not know. So yeah, with the subconscious, I think more people are or super consciousness, more people are understanding the benefit and measuring it scientifically, which is cool to see the words of saints being proven so much in experiments.
I find myself often to be the defender of psychotherapy here, because I don't see it
defender
as, yeah, because I think there's a wide variety of different ways to practice this outside, and some of them I think are very beneficial, especially in certain situations. If we go back to what F.W.H. Myers said, he wrote a collection of essays that's called Science and a Future Life, and that was back in the early 1900s, so quite a while back. And it says here about him that Myers believed that a theory of consciousness must be part of a unified model of mind, which derives from the full range of human experience, including not only normal psychological phenomena, but also a wide variety of abnormal and supernormal phenomena. In the book, Myers believed he had provided evidence for the existence of the soul and survival of personality after death. The book cites cases of automatic writing, hypnotism, mediumship, possession, psychokinesis, which I'm a big fan of, and telepathy. And we have to say there's a caveat. So in most scientific publications, F.W.H. Myers is not regarded as being the consensus, but there is a
That
team
can be a good sign.
a team of scientists from University of Virginia School of Medicine, my alma mater, who wrote a paper called The Irreducible Mind, and they cite him a lot, and that paper was peer-reviewed. So I guess it's making its way slowly into popular science, I would say.
Yeah, that's cool. I was recently I was watching, so that psychologist I was talking about was Jordan Peterson, and he draws on Freud and Carl Jung and others. And it always ends up in that same place. But there's Roger Penrose, who's a famous mathematician, won a Nobel Prize, and he was talking about, I think it's Gödel's theorem, my account is not going to be very, very precise, but basically he was talking how consciousness transcends, or understanding transcends proof of, so for example, a mathematical theorem. So we can try the proof of a mathematical theorem, but there's still the consciousness that transcends it. So, and that he is very well known. So it was interesting to see his expounding of physics and theory of consciousness, but also a very rigorous mathematician coming into it as well. So we're coming to that time, I think, where logically we're starting to understand more. The mechanics doesn't explain itself.
And to wrap this section up, there's a chapter in the Divine Romance where Guruji talks about the spectrum of spiritual consciousness, and I thought we could read out the first few paragraphs of that. Lauren, could you kick us off?
Spiritual consciousness is a vast subject. It comprises the entire scope of this human consciousness we possess. Consciousness, in its essence, is ever pure. It engages in all actions, both good and evil, yet remains unaffected and untarnished. A sword may cut a leaf and become stained by it, yet the sword itself is not changed. Such is consciousness. A sword that has been used to kill an innocent man is condemned as evil. A sword that has been used to destroy a wicked enemy is honored as virtuous. Similarly, when consciousness is used to do good things, it is called spiritual consciousness. And when it is used to do wrong, it is called evil consciousness.
Just as the river has a source, so the river of consciousness has a source. It descends from cosmic consciousness, the consciousness of God that is beyond all creation. When cosmic consciousness comes into the realm of matter, into each of the atoms that make up the planets and island universes, and the different form of plant, animal, and human life, that consciousness is called Christ consciousness. When Christ consciousness descends into the soul and pure mind of man, it is called superconsciousness. When superconsciousness descends into the realm of imagination, it is called subconsciousness.
When subconsciousness descends into the muscular and sensory phases of human life, it is called human or waking consciousness. When waking consciousness becomes attached to the senses and material things, it is called worldly consciousness. And then when it is used to harm oneself or others, it is evil consciousness. But when it is used to do good things and to produce attunement with God, then it is called spiritual consciousness.
You know, one thing, what we've been talking about, the attunement with the guru, and if, positive attitude, helping to learn the lessons, and of that ladder from super consciousness down and the other way up. Something interesting was that this psychologist Peterson was talking about how, so Guruji says that if we have if we have a negative attitude in a test, our progress is reduced to almost zero. And if we have a positive, and then we'll just have to keep going through it again and again. And if we have a positive attitude, then that enables us to be receptive and learn the lesson. And Peterson was expounding from the psychological science point of view that they'd found that actually, if we neglect to deal with difficult things that we have to overcome in our life, that it dulls down our consciousness and our faculties. But if we take a positive and proactive approach, they've literally measured that it changes our whole brain structure and completely rejuvenates it. So it's interesting to see more study leading up that ladder as well, from the other perspective, top down and bottom up.
It's a good segue, because I think that's what Guruji did. He took the positive approach, and he says the reward was an effortless harmony with my guru. And he said, I discovered him then to be trusting, considerate, and silently loving. Yet, however, that last sentence, I find that interesting. It says, undemonstrative. However, he bestowed no word of affection. And we know this, a lot of people will notice that he told Yogananda only twice that he loved him. This is probably how we can imagine this.
These two lines are quite curious, aren't they? And thought-provoking. It feels like Sri Yukteswar's methods of encouragement were like very, very subtle. And it forced Mukunda to rely on intuition to see how his spiritual progress review went how often he did it, which also that approach lends itself well to us, because we don't live in an ashram with Paramahansa Yogananda. We have to use the same technique that it would appear Sri Yukteswar enforced amongst his disciples to intuit and feel how they're doing and how happy or unhappy your guru is with you.
Yeah, it maybe last episode, Prank, when you said about the various customs in India, that often things aren't necessarily said, but it's more behavior. And obviously an avatar and any soul transcends a certain country's customs, but that there are customs of East and West, and the spiritual focus of a consciousness that's predominant in the East, that those customs, it seems like they're there, that it's just a natural expression because that's more conducive for developing spiritual consciousness as well. And looking at this previously, when Guruji talks about Sri Yukteswar's rebukes and being a sensitive fear developed to them, but then when Guruji says he abandoned his underlying resentment, then that he discovered Sri Yukteswar to be trusting, considerate, and silently loving. So that when we change our attitude, and our consciousness, and then there's that, it's almost like we're bringing that discipline on ourselves. And then when we are receptive and put ourselves in tune, then the inner nature of the guru comes out, and that's no longer needed.
It would appear that Sri Yukteswar's approach to feedback was imbalanced, in the sense that if it was constructive feedback or criticism, he would straight away say it right, and he'd perhaps bruise your ego. But if it was complimentary or good feedback, he probably doesn't want to inflate an ego, right? So he's very subtle about how he gives feedback on good spiritual progress.
Yeah, and that also, on the disciples' part, how do I deal with that? I've done something right, I haven't been told off. And I think it helps to develop a certain stability or maybe confidence.
Next, Yogananda talks about the spiritual temperament of him and his guru, and he describes two concepts. He gives the Sanskrit names of them. He talks about Jnana, which is wisdom, and Bhakti, which is devotion. And he tells the reader that he is a very devotional God seeker. Devotion plays a big role in his sadhana, and he was thinking that this is, I don't know, maybe that's an assumption of mine, that this is the norm, and he was somehow surprised that it wasn't as pronounced in his guru, and that his guru was more of a jnana yogi, and he described it as dry, and he was missing the love part. He then talks about the effect it had on him, and he was asking himself, does that mean that my own devotion is going to be diminished being in this ashram? And he felt that this was not the case, but rather he felt an increase in his devotion, in his devotional approach to God. I don't know if that was because he felt he had to make up for his guru's lack of demonstrating devotion, or maybe those two go hand in hand and in some way complete each other. Lauren?
In some ways, I feel that Guruji's relationship with Sri Yukteswar mirrors that of God in his aspects of Divine Mother and Heavenly Father. You know, we've got the
Wow.
love which Guruji brings, and then you have the masculine, you know, it's just as it is of Sri Yukteswar, and the two coming together bring the harmony, right? And we can see that so clearly that, you know, once they actually attune themselves, they become so sweet in that relationship, and it doesn't you know, there's no disharmony to be had, because they are one. They have become unionized, which is another reflection point for ourselves, I guess. You know, can we apply the same love and wisdom in ourselves and bring that to a state of harmony and alignment?
That's a very nice analogy, Lauren. Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense. That it reminds me a little bit of Guruji talking about his parents, how they were more of the authoritarian and the loving part, and then when his mother passed, his father was trying to like embody both of those qualities.
Yeah, I was having this conversation on a similar level with some colleagues at work today. I'm wearing like a
Nice.
pinky, purpley, feminine color shirt today, and my office, the depot manager, was also wearing a pink and purple, and I said to her, "Oh, look, we're matching today," and she said, "Oh yeah, that's very feminine, isn't it?" No, she said, "Everyone needs to connect to their feminine side." I said, "Ah, well said." And then I gave the example of there was another guy, one of the other guys at work. He was saying that his wife was trying to force him to wear a pink shirt because they were going to a wedding, and they wanted to be matching. And he's like this. I work in a very, you know, masculine environment, I must say. Basically, he was like, "No, there's no way I'm wearing a pink shirt." And she said, "No, you are." And then they had this massive argument, and they ended up going to the wedding, which was, you know, miles away. And then they got there, and they had the argument again. And then he said, "I'm not wearing it. I didn't bring it, so I can't possibly wear it." And then she got it out. It's like, "Yes, I did. I knew you weren't going to bring it. I brought it. You're wearing it." And then so he ended up wearing it. But you know, it's this like stained his memory of this wedding that was probably really nice just because of the color of the shirt that he was wearing. And my office, the depot manager, was saying, even he needs to, you know, everyone needs to connect to their feminine side. It's so important. I was like, "Wow, she's saying profound stuff." But let's not go any deeper in the middle of the office. People will think we're insane.
Yeah, I think it's fairly, like, it's not uncommon for people, at least in this country, and in the US, I think, to wear, you know, like with suits, for guys to wear, you know, pink shades or something like that. Sometimes with rugby, it's done as a joke. But yeah. So yeah, I think it's just all colors that we're seeking to. Maybe that's an outer manifestation of the principle that Lauren talked about.
Guruji has some description of the So if you feel like there are different ways to get to God, Guruji describes them in the Bhagavad Gita, and there's a section where he talks about the path of wisdom. Kian, do you have that section handy?
Oh, I do. Okay. All right, this is on page 537, Guruji's Gita commentary. The wisdom path, Jnana Yoga, is long, dry, and hard. The yoga way is short, easy, and strewn with perceptions of ever-new bliss. Wisdom is not as impelling a force as divine bliss.
So as a path, it might be not the best choice, but it is easy to see that every avatar, especially the avatars on our altar, but I think most avatars out there, they are an embodiment of a divine quality, and wisdom is one of them.
Most avatars.
Yogananda. Yeah, I would say so. I know that about the ones on our altar that they all embody a special quality, but I would assume that all of them do. Guruji emphasized a lot. His path is he calls it Kriya Yoga plus devotion. So I guess that encompasses the path of yoga, but also devotion. So those are two key things that are important. And yeah, he called it the airplane route to God. So this is an effective way to get there. And I guess that's what a lot of us care about. How do we get there fast? I don't think we would say I would rather take longer but take a different route because that's what I want. I don't know if many people have that opinion.
The long cut.
The like cart route.
Yeah. I'm really glad that he, in that mathematical equation, he put Kriya Yoga plus devotion, and he put Kriya Yoga first, because there's a lot of work in progress for me to fulfill the devotion requirement. And Kriya Yoga, I could just apply it mathematically as I do. But it's so comforting that if you master yoga, then all those other elements of Jnana, Bhakti, Karma, all those action, all those paths will merge into one. So because of my Sri Yukteswar temperament, as opposed to Yogananda temperament, in terms of my work I need to do in terms of Bhakti, I use any and every tool at my disposal to develop that. Like, for example, there's some of the stories from the lessons that are really, really focus on devotion and really exemplar devotees. Like there's one about Tulsidas and the Ramayana that's called the saint who converted a thief. That's a really nice one. And then there's also lots of little stories in the Bhagavad Gita. For example, when Arjuna and Duryodhana, when they were approaching Krishna just before the battle, Krishna was lying down sleeping, and then Arjuna went to his feet and Duryodhana went to his head, and Krishna saw Arjuna. Krishna saw Arjuna first, and Krishna said, "Well, what would you like? Each of you." And the options were, you can either have me, or you can have my army. And Arjuna, without hesitation, said, "I'll have you, Krishna." And Duryodhana was like, "Yes, Krishna's army is invincible. Now I've got this idiot Arjuna has picked the wrong side." But obviously, the moral of the story is that any side that Krishna or God is on is you can't lose, right? So the point is, I like to use all examples such as those to bolster my devotion elements, and obviously that also applies for others that may be like really good with devotion but not so good with the Kriya or really good with those, but Jnana is maybe need to be worked on, or Karma Yoga needs to be worked on, selfless service, all that kind of stuff. So we've got loads of fantastic stories and examples that we can use to inspire us and encourage us and move us forward.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. Yeah, it was with Kriya, you know, in the lessons or in Guruji's writings, Guruji talks about in India that you were taught to go into the silence first and then being asked to love God. And so that naturally, that when we still ourselves, well, naturally that bliss and etc., you know, devotion comes up. So then we feel that natural compulsion. And so, yeah, at the young adult meeting, the one just gone, there was one of the those who attended said the reason he came was because one of his friends, who was a militant atheist, tried Yogananda's teachings and found that it worked. And then he said that the testimony of a militant atheist is impressive. So I thought that a very interesting example of just applying the teachings and then seeing if they work for you scientifically. And obviously, militant atheists aren't known for their devotion as well. Yeah.
I'm going to put everyone on the spot now, but we like these moments. I'm curious if there are anything that you do that you'd be willing to share that increases your devotion. I'm asking for myself and other people, obviously, but also for me, because, you know, like Priyank, my devotion is something that I have been looking at, and I know that I need much more love in order to get where I'd love to be. So if you have any insights on devotion and how we can increase it, I'd love to hear.
I think I found a really clever answer to this, because I feel whenever I have those moments where I feel Guruji has just interacted with me, I feel his presence, I feel something happened because I prayed to him, or I feel like this is a hint for Michael, you got to change this. I keep complete secrecy of them, because that's what keeps them private, special. And I sometimes write them down in my diary, but that's it. And I feel that kind of creates an intimate relationship.
You can tell us though, Mike. We won't tell anyone.
Yes.
This is not recorded. Yeah, that's I think that's part of the, oftentimes that people can be trying to prove something, but Guruji talks about keeping our relationship, you know, with God to ourselves. And for me, I think a consistent routine and making sure that I'm practicing all the techniques every day. Because there was a talk, the most recent one from Brother Anandamoy, about the mother aspect of God. And that one of the monks asked Guruji, what does Kriya Yoga do? And of course, knew about the spiritual accelerator and magnetizing the spine, etc. But the monk said he felt compelled to ask a question, and Guruji said it puts you in tune with the Guru. And so too with all the other techniques. So for me, that's working to practice the techniques as consistently, but also with the depth and intensity and length when possible. Maybe that's just an extended one on a weekend. And then also something that I find personally is studying Guruji's writings every day. So the lessons, but also like in the morning, that will set me up. And I feel there's a massive difference for me. So like Man's Eternal Quest, if I'm reading something from that, for me, that helps set me up for the rest of the day. And then with that consciousness, because it'll kind of bring almost into like a worldly engagement in the way of, you know, if we're studying or some Guruji's teachings, we're reading. And then so I feel like then in that spirit, then I go through to the rest of the day. And also I think the practicing the presence in the sense of the Guruji and all the gurus and God is here with us, so that in that stillness, if we concentrates on that and refuse to believe anything else, then that can prove itself, and we can take advantage of those benefits. Yeah. And Lauren, I'd be interested of anything that you after Priyank.
Yeah, me too. I already gave mine, but I'm going to go again.
Yay!
Simple one. I think I may have already told you, but I've got a very
More
cheap,
gems.
I've got a very cheap Casio watch. But the fantastic thing about these Japanese Casio watches is it's got a function that's really useful for us on a spiritual path, which is the 1 hourly
Robot.
beep. Hourly beep.
Right. Okay.
So I've got that to constantly not on loud, and whenever I always have my watch, not because I want to look at the time, but because I want to hear that beep. And then whenever I hear that beep, I can take just a few seconds to go within and devote that second, not to the practice or any practice like Hong So or a Kriya, but just to be a bit devotional in that moment. So
That's
for example, I've got you guys have been to my house, but actually every room in my house has got a picture of a guru or something of spiritual significance. So then if I'm in any of those rooms, I'll look in that direction. Or if I'm at work, I've got a very lovely picture of Guruji, black and white picture, just under my monitor. And I usually don't like to put spiritual pictures where people can ask questions and criticize perhaps. But this one is a very lovely one. It's one where Guruji is working on his desk. There's like a side on one, and anyone that's looking at it would just think, oh, that's obviously his mum or his grandmother or his aunt or someone, and they don't ask questions, but obviously we know. So whenever it goes off at work, I just look, close my eyes and look down in that direction.
That's funny. I'm not sure the three of us could get away with that in the same way.
People think he's my mom as well. When I think that's a standard question.
No, you will be able to, because it's black and white.
Yeah, black and white.
Oh,
I used to babysit this little girl, and she was about 4, and I had a picture of Guruji up in the flat, and I remember one day she was round and she took it down from the mantelpiece, and she went, "Is this you?"
Oh.
It was so sweet, but always like really funny, because obviously it's not me.
Oh,
maybe it was a spiritual similarity.
Yeah.
Yes, my Guruji and I are one.
Yeah. I wish. In answer to your question, Kian, what do I do?
Not that you have to say, but just
no. Similar to you, I find that particularly if I'm having a bit of a drier period, and I think, oh, my devotion isn't quite, there. Funnily enough, practicing the teachings, practicing the techniques, and being really focused in my meditation and all of that opens up the gate.
yeah.
And it's a really lovely kind of formula, because it works every time without fail, just applying myself. The other thing I love to do is now that Priyank has very kindly lent me his harmonium, I can I love to sing for God, and it's something that I've been doing for a little while, and now I can make up chants or allow them to kind of go through and just sing for God, and know that no one's listening but him, right? And there's so much beauty in those moments that fills my little heart. So that helps. And also I agree with you, Ken. When we're reading something by Guruji, or like we're listening to something by him, or a story about him, and sometimes I get really touched by all that he had to go through, especially in a wake. Everything he had to journey through to give us what we have today.
I've just seen the trailer of that, so I've yet to fully experience.
Oh yeah, you haven't watched it yet. Oh my God, I get
Yeah.
emotional thinking about it. It's just yeah. So there's a few little things.
Yeah, that's really nice. You made me think about a couple more. One is that, you know, Guruji talks about devoting all good and bad habits to God. And so, and he said to, I think he said, was it his first disciple, was Dr. Lewis, he said, I want you to promise me that you'll never avoid me.
Yeah.
And so no matter like what it is that I'm doing or thinking about, it might be an inner, you know, a battle or focus or an outer one, but then I'll just, the point of unconditional love and devotion, that's something that I was just reflecting on. This, like, I think it was one of Brother Nandamoy's talks, and he was like, it means unconditional. It means there's no condition where that doesn't apply. So for me, inviting that, and it's not easy, as Guruji said, and the world agrees that it's not easy, and the world's not a happy place. And also in the, I think, and the you know, the constant reminders about keeping the attention at the spiritual eye. And oftentimes I think if my consciousness, if the consciousness wanders off somewhere, then we might ask ourselves, where in my body is where is my consciousness? And then if that's pulled up to the Christ center or medulla, and then we might experience a change. And so constantly training ourselves, I feel that helps as well.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone.
And then Yogananda summarizes his relationship with Sri Yukteswar, and he, like only he could, finds a very poetic way of saying it. He says, our relationship is somewhat inarticulate, yet possesses a hidden eloquence. So some people might be confused when they read this, but I think by now we understand what this means. This means that there's oftentimes no need for words, but there is an understanding between them that is not uttered, but it's like on a higher level, on a spiritual level. Yeah, he says it's rendering speech inutile. So no necessity to say it out loud. And the last sentence is, quietly sitting beside him, I would feel his bounty pouring peacefully over my being. So that's, I guess, also one of the benefits when you have your guru, your living guru next to you, which is a special blessing. And he took full advantage of this.
Yeah, it makes me think of a quote later in the book where Guruji is said to Sri Yukteswar that only once have you said, I love you. And Sri Yukteswar responds with, must I bring into the realm of cold speech the warm sentiments of the wordless heart? And I think that our own lives as well, we can experience it. We can test, you know, when people say, I love you, it could be to, you know, whoever in our lives. That in itself really doesn't mean anything, and nor does it do anything, you know, just the words. And we can practice saying it, you know, sometimes it's viewed as like it's so holy or romantic or so powerful. If we say it again and again and again, generally love doesn't increase with that. But if, you know, in deep meditation, then if we feel that and we feel that connection, and then we say it from that consciousness, then it's completely different. But I think about the inarticulate in terms of outer speech, but that doesn't negate having the deepest type of relationship. And so that we can testing ourselves, testing that peace and joy gained in meditation, and seeing how then we're able to love others, because Guruji says that divine bliss given to others is or bliss given to others is divine love. And testing that practicality and seeing if it improves our own life, both within and with other people as well.
That feels very wise, you know, especially not to say things unless you really have the full heart behind it. It's that sincerity, isn't it? But I'm gonna do a little 180 on this, because I remember hearing a talk once by a monk from SRF, and he was talking about increasing our devotion for God. Well, I think it was a monk or a nun. Sorry, my memory isn't quite there.
Monastic.
Monastic. They were saying that, you know, if you just say over and over, "I love you" to God, and even if you don't feel it in your heart, like straight away, at some point that repetition, that vocalization of our love for God over time will open our heart to Him, and the floodgates of that love. And I did try it at one point, and I have to say it did work. So, as with all things, Kian, I'm sure there's a balance between both of them, right? You know, if we're saying to people that we love them, and it's devoid, then that's one thing. But to speak to God and say that we love Him, even if it's not fully there yet, He sees the willingness in those words, even if it's not fully there in our heart.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that discrimination. That's if it's to God, and even if that's to another person, but it's God is the focus, then I think that brings that brings that divine, that consciousness. But before I was referencing is in if we just say it, not thinking of God. And oftentimes, sometimes people think that's associated with showing how much you care someone by saying it. But and of course, anything directed to God is brings us with greater attunement. And I think that's what we were talking about earlier was the quote from Sister Jnana, which is, "What does it matter what you feel? Act rightly, and in time the right feeling will come." And so, just refusing to give up, and then it does come, and it will come, and letting it prove itself in our life.
It reminds me what you guys just said, saying it to another person reminds me of a talk by Brother Tyagananda that he gave recently at Lake Shrine, where he stressed that love does not exist unless you express it. So love is not something that you can just have inside of you, and if you never express it, nobody will ever know of your love. Right. So that doesn't mean you have to say "I love you" to everybody all the time. You can express it through actions and through warmth and through all different kind of things. And if we look at Yogananda and Sri Yukteswar here, I feel this is the end product of a long, hard work on their relationship. They really created this over the years, this inarticulate yet hidden eloquence relationship. And part of Sri Yukteswar showing his love, as we mentioned earlier, is reprimanding him, doing feedback, giving feedback. That was kind of his way of loving him, and Guruji's acceptance of that and changing himself was his response to the love that he received. And so they kind of merged into this kind of symbiotic relationship that was a very loving one, but they felt it mostly on the inside. There was no need for words.
I simplify this myself. I think of love
to math. Is it a math equation? E is MC squared.
That's not that simple. But I was going to say that love is obviously a very big word, isn't it? But in the simple terms, how I like to think about it is that it's essentially the highest emotion you can have, right? It's the highest feeling, highest warmth, highest level of affection that you can have, whether it's for someone or for God or for whatever it is. It's like the highest, right? And the highest warmth. And when I after my meditation practices, especially if I've had a really good meditation, then I bask in that feeling. And I don't feel the need to say I love you, because the feeling says it. So I'm not one for words, but I am one for enjoying and experiencing this feeling. And here he's he's saying that, you know, I would feel his bounty pouring peacefully over my being. And this is that feeling when if and when you have that feeling, this he's described it here. So you can just enjoy that. If you don't, like me, like saying these words, you can just enjoy the feeling and try and reciprocate it, again, through feeling.
Yeah. Guruji talks about cosmic consciousness. The way to cultivate that is applying Christ consciousness in the world. And we all have the different ways that we might feel that we do that. I think when Sri Yukteswar says, I think it's later in the book about, or maybe in that chapter, about learning to feel the verbiage behind the words of others. And so to that effect as well, I think when we're talking to someone, and for me, like learning what actual love is, like, you know, what is love, I need to experience it, is not what the world tells us it is. And so in what we experience in meditation, and then learning to give that to others, and that can be silently, that can just be, you know, in sending, maybe while we're speaking to someone, putting feeling of sending love to them at the same time. Or it might be saying it and learning to express ourselves. Emotional intelligence with guys isn't always the highest. So yeah, but I think we all have different ways to cultivate and express that, and we have to learn, because ultimately, you know, the avatars, that's just unconditional love freely available, and that we have to, that's part of our expansion, is giving that to all.
Well said. I think we've done justice to this part of chapter 12. What are we going to look forward to in part 14 of chapter 12, Brad?
I'm very pleased to say something a little bit different, because we've had 13 parts of this chapter that are very tough to break down and require like really strong willpower and connection to what the words are, and to like decipher them and stuff like that. But in the next section, we are going to talk about really just one interaction between three people, I would say. So Sri Yukteswar, Mukunda, of course, and a curious fellow by the name of Kumar. And curious because he won Sri Yukteswar's heart and became his favorite. But then Sri Yukteswar had to backtrack on his favorite, essentially, because Kumar severely let him down. And this really further emphasized, it's another example of in the previous part we had where Sri Yukteswar backed down from criticizing Mukunda in front of his father and said, you know, that was wrong, essentially. Here, this is another example where Sri Yukteswar has to backtrack from his selection of Kumar as his favorite, or giving him undue attention, which really gives us another example of the unravelable nature of Sri Yukteswar, and hopefully we can break that down. And also a really nice example of Mukunda, even though he can see things aren't essentially going his way or the right way, he doesn't act out of jealousy and resentment, and really does the right thing, which is all stuff that we can break down next episode.
Sounds great.
The famous Kumar story, something to look forward to next week. Thank you, Lauren, Kian, Priyank, and thank you to all the listeners. Till next time. Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.
Jai Guru.